The lecture hall was enormous. It could hold 3,000 students, and today every seat was filled. Young officers from hundreds of different species sat in rows that stretched up toward the ceiling. Some had 4 arms, some had scales, some looked almost human. They all wore the dark blue uniform of the Galactic Defense Academy. Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat in the back row. He was human with short dark hair and tired eyes. He looked young, maybe 28 years old. But his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much. Next to him sat Cadet Amy Porter. She was also human, fresh out of basic training. Her uniform was perfectly pressed and her eyes were bright with excitement. This was her first week at the academy and she wanted to learn everything. At the front of the hall, High Instructor Krell stood at the podium. He was a Korthan, one of the stone people. His body looked like it was carved from gray rock and he stood 3 meters tall. He had been teaching at the academy for 3,000 years. Today we discussed the Prime Wars. Krell's voice boomed through the hall. He didn't need a microphone. These wars happen every 1,000 years. The Devourers come from dark space. They consume everything, worlds, ships, people, everything. The hall was silent. Everyone knew about the Devourers. They were the nightmare that every species feared. Children across the galaxy had bad dreams about them. Krell continued. The last Prime War was 847 years ago. 17 species stood against the Devourers. He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. All 17 species were destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. Every world they had, every ship, every person, gone. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. She had read about this in textbooks, but hearing it from someone who had lived through those times was different. No species has survived a Prime War, Krell said. His stone face showed no emotion, but his voice was heavy with ancient sadness. That is the truth you must understand. When the Devourers come, civilizations end. In the back row, Jake Morrison's lips moved. The words were so quiet that almost no one could hear them. We did. Amy's head snapped toward him. She had barely caught the whisper. What did you say? Jake's face went blank. Nothing. Just thinking out loud, but Amy had heard him. We did. What did that mean? Humans weren't even in space during the last Prime War. Everyone knew that. Humans had only made first contact with alien species 200 years ago. Krell was still talking. The next Prime War is predicted to occur in 150 years. We have time to prepare. Time to build our fleets. Time to study the old records and learn from the mistakes of those who came before us. A hand went up in the front row. It belonged to Commander Lyra Vex, a Zentari. She looked like a large insect with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered in the light. She was the head of tactical training at the academy. Yes, Commander Vex. Krell acknowledged her. I have reviewed the historical data, Vex said. Her voice had a clicking quality to it. The species that fell were weak. They had no discipline, no proper strategy. The Zentari were not yet spacefaring during the last Prime War, but if we had been, the outcome would have been different. Some students nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. It seemed disrespectful to call extinct species weak. Vex wasn't finished. And the younger species, like the humans, are fortunate they arrived after the real fighting was done. They have no concept of true warfare. Amy felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to say something to defend her people, but she was just a cadet. What could she say? She glanced at Jake, expecting him to be angry too. But he just sat there, his hands gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles had turned white. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Krell's stone eyes seemed to look directly at Jake for a moment. Thank you for your perspective, Commander Vex. Though I would caution against judging any species too quickly. History has a way of revealing truths we did not expect. The lecture continued for another hour. Krell showed images of destroyed worlds, cities turned to ash, fleets broken and scattered. The Devourers themselves, massive creatures that looked like they were made of metal and flesh at the same time. When the lecture finally ended, students filed out of the hall in small groups talking quietly among themselves. Amy tried to catch up with Jake, but he had already left. She found him in the corridor outside, staring at a wall display that showed the Academy's memorial garden. Lieutenant Morrison, she said carefully. He turned to look at her. Yes, Cadet Porter? In the lecture, you said something. You said we did. What did you mean? Jake's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about, but I heard you. You said humans survived the Prime War. That's impossible, Jake said. His voice was flat. Humans weren't in space back then. Everyone knows that. He walked away before she could ask anything else. Amy stood there confused and curious. Something about the way he had said it, the way his hands had gripped that desk, the look in his eyes. It all felt wrong. That evening, Amy went to the Academy Library. It was a vast place, filled with data terminals that could access information from thousands of worlds. She started searching for information about human history. The official records were clear. Humans had developed space travel about 300 years ago. They had made first contact with the Galactic Council 200 years ago. Before that, they had been isolated on their home planet Earth. But as Amy dug deeper, she found something strange. There were gaps in the timeline, periods where there was no information at all, and some files were marked as restricted, which was odd for basic historical data. She tried to access one of the restricted files. A message appeared on her screen. Access denied. Level 7 clearance required. Level 7 clearance was reserved for senior military commanders and council members. Why would historical records need that kind of security? Amy spent 3 more hours searching, but she found nothing useful. Just more gaps and more restricted files. Finally, frustrated and tired, she left the library. As she walked back to her quarters, she decided to take a shortcut through the memorial garden. It was a peaceful place with plants from 100 different worlds and monuments honoring those who had died in various conflicts. She was halfway through the garden when she saw him. Jake Morrison standing in front of a large black wall. His hand was pressed against it and his head was bowed. Amy stepped closer, staying in the shadows. She didn't want to interrupt what looked like a private moment. But she could see the wall now. It was covered in names, thousands of them, carved into the black stone. At the top of the wall was an inscription. Even from a distance, Amy could read it. For those who held the line, Earth's final defense, and below that a date. Amy's breath caught in her throat. The date was 847 years ago, the exact same year as the last Prime War. She must have made a sound because Jake turned around. For a moment, they just looked at each other. His face was wet. He had been crying. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked quietly. "Long enough," Amy said. She walked toward the wall, her eyes scanning the inscription. "This says Earth. This says 847 years ago. But that's impossible. Humans weren't in space then." Jake wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Go back to your quarters, cadet. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns every human," Amy said. Her voice was stronger now. "What is this wall? Why is it here? Why does nobody talk about it?" Jake was silent for a long moment. Then he looked back at the wall, at all those names. Because the truth was buried. Because the galaxy decided humans weren't ready to know their own history. "What truth?" Amy demanded. Jake turned to face her fully. In the dim light of the garden, his eyes looked ancient. The truth that when High Instructor Krell said no species has survived a prime war, he was wrong. One species did survive. One species held the line when 17 others fell. One species fought the Devourers for 3 years with nothing but primitive weapons and determination. Amy felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "You mean humans," Jake said. "We were there, we fought, and we survived. But the cost," he looked back at the wall of names. 11 billion people died. Our whole world burned. But we held the line." Amy's mind was reeling. But how? Why doesn't anyone know? Why isn't this in the history books? "Because the Galactic Council was afraid," Jake said. "They found Earth after the war, found a species that had done what should have been impossible, a species that had become something dangerous in those 3 years of hell. So they made a choice. They sealed the records. They waited 650 years. Then they discovered humanity as a young, innocent species." "That's insane," Amy whispered. "Maybe," Jake said. "But it kept the peace. It let humanity recover. It gave us time to become something other than a war-broken species." Amy stared at him. "How do you know all this? These are secrets that would require the highest clearance. You're just a lieutenant unless—" Her eyes widened. "Unless you were there." Jake smiled, but it was the saddest smile Amy had ever seen. "I was 7 years old when the Devourers came. My parents put me in a cryopod. Thousands of children were frozen, hidden away, kept in sleep while the war raged. When I woke up, 300 years had passed. The galaxy?" Amy couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her small quarters, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Jake had told her. Humans had fought in the Prime War. 11 billion people had died. The entire history she had learned was a lie. She got out of bed and walked to her computer terminal. She pulled up the Academy's database again and started searching. This time she knew what to look for. The gaps in human history, the restricted files, the dates that didn't make sense. There had to be more information somewhere. The Galactic Council couldn't have erased everything. Records existed. She just had to find them. Around 3 in the morning, she found something interesting, a reference to something called the Restricted Archives. It was located in the deepest level of the Academy, in the old section that had been built 1,000 years ago. The description said it contained historical records from extinct civilizations. Amy made a decision. She had to see those archives. She had to know the truth. The next morning, she waited outside the instructor's offices until Jake arrived. He looked surprised to see her. "Cadet Porter, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," Amy said quietly. "Privately." Jake looked around to make sure no one was listening, then nodded. He led her into his small office and closed the door. "What is it?" he asked. "The Restricted Archives," Amy said. "I think that's where the real records are kept. The ones about Earth during the Prime War. I want to see them." Jake shook his head immediately. "No, that's too dangerous. Those archives are sealed for a reason." "You said the Devourers might be coming back early," Amy said. "You said humanity needs to be ready. How can we be ready if we don't know our own history? If we don't know what our ancestors learned fighting them?" Jake was silent for a moment. Then he sighed. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," Amy said firmly. "Fine," Jake said. "But if we do this, you have to promise me something. What you see in those archives stays between us. You can't tell anyone. Not your friends, not your family, no one. The consequences could be catastrophic." "I promise," Amy said. That night, long after most of the Academy had gone to sleep, Jake and Amy made their way to the lower levels. The old section of the station was dark and quiet. The corridors here were narrow, built in an older style from a time when the Academy was much smaller. Jake used his instructor credentials to access doors that were normally locked. They went down elevator after elevator, deeper and deeper into the station's core. "I've never been down here," Amy whispered. "I didn't even know these levels existed." "Most people don't," Jake said. "The restricted archives are kept separate from everything else. Only a handful of people in the entire galaxy have access to them." They finally reached a heavy door made of some dark metal. There was a security panel next to it. Jake placed his hand on the panel and spoke his name and rank. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the panel beeped and the door slid open. "How did you get access to this place?" Amy asked. "All the sleepers have access," Jake said, "so we can check on the records. Make sure they stay sealed." Inside, the archives were vast. Row after row of storage units stretched into the darkness. The air was cold and dry, perfect for preserving ancient data. Jake led Amy through the rows until they reached a section marked with a symbol she didn't recognize. "This is it," he said. "The human section. Everything the council sealed away." He activated a terminal and started pulling up files. Images appeared on the screen. Amy leaned forward to look. The first image was of Earth, but not the Earth she knew. This Earth was different. There were massive cities covering the continents. Lights glowed everywhere. The image was labeled with a date, 850 years ago. 12 billion people, Jake said quietly. Earth was thriving. We had fusion power, early space travel, colonies on the Moon and Mars. We weren't ready for what came next. He pulled up the next file. It was a video recording. Amy watched as something massive appeared in the darkness of space. It looked like a ship, but it was alive somehow. Metal and flesh combined into something that should not exist. "The Devourers," Amy whispered. "The first wave hit the Mars colony," Jake said. "It was gone in 6 hours. Then they came for Earth. The videos that followed were nightmares. Massive creatures dropping from the sky, cities burning, ships fighting desperately in orbit. Human weapons seemed so primitive compared to what Amy had learned about at the Academy, but the people using them fought with incredible courage. "We weren't supposed to last more than a day," Jake said. That's what the experts thought. The Devourers had destroyed 17 species, some with technology far more advanced than ours. But humans didn't give up. He showed her battle reports. Amy read them with growing amazement. Every time the Devourers adapted to a human tactic, humans found a new way to fight. When energy weapons proved useless, they switched to kinetic rounds. When the creatures learned to avoid those, humans started using nuclear weapons at close range. We turned our entire planet into a fortress, Jake said. Every city had weapons. Every person knew how to fight. We lost billions, but we kept learning, kept adapting. The Devourers had never faced a species that learned so quickly. Amy saw images of massive defense platforms built in orbit, ships that were little more than engines and weapons, soldiers in armor that looked crude but effective, and everywhere the faces of people who knew they were probably going to die but fought anyway. The siege lasted 3 years, Jake continued. 3 years of constant fighting. No rest, no peace, just survival. By the end, 11 billion people were dead. Most of our cities were ruins. Our oceans were polluted. The sky was full of ash. But we won, Amy said. Jake shook his head. We survived. That's different from winning. The Devourers finally retreated, but not because we defeated them. They left because they had exhausted themselves. They had never had to fight so hard for a single planet before. They went back to dark space to recover like they always do. He pulled up another file. This one showed Earth after the war. Amy felt tears in her eyes. The beautiful planet from the first image was gone. What remained looked dead. 1 billion survivors, Jake said. That's all that was left. And most of them were traumatized, broken. We had become something terrible in those 3 years, something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that would sacrifice everything for survival. That's when the Galactic Council arrived, Amy guessed. Yes, Jake confirmed. They had been monitoring the battle from a safe distance. When it was over, they came to investigate. They found us, and they were afraid. He showed her the Council's internal reports. Amy read them with growing anger. The Council members had debated what to do about humanity. Some wanted to help. Others wanted to quarantine Earth. A few even suggested destroying humanity completely, seeing them as too dangerous to let survive. They compromised, Jake said. They would help humanity recover, but in secret. They would seal all records of the Prime War. They would take the survivors, especially the children, and put them in cryosleep. Then they would wait, give Earth time to heal, to rebuild. 650 years later, they would discover humanity as if for the first time. That's insane, Amy said. They had no right to do that. Maybe, Jake said. But it worked. By the time the Council officially made contact with Earth, humans had recovered. The population was back to 10 billion. The planet was green again, and the people had no memory of the war. They were peaceful, curious, eager to join the galactic community. Exactly what the Council wanted. But the sleepers remembered, Amy said. We were woken up gradually over the centuries, Jake said, given new identities, integrated into human society. Our job was to watch, to make sure the secret stayed hidden, and to be ready, just in case the Devourers ever came back. Amy sat back, overwhelmed by everything she had learned. How many sleepers are there? About 300, Jake said, scattered across human space. We're in every branch of the military, every level of government. We watch and wait. And now you think the Devourers are coming back early, Amy said. Jake nodded grimly. The energy signatures we're detecting match what we saw before they arrived last time. And they're getting stronger. I think we have months, maybe a year at most. What do we do? Amy asked. Before Jake could answer, a voice spoke from the darkness behind them. That is an excellent question. Amy and Jake spun around. High Instructor Krell stood there, his massive stone form barely fitting in the corridor between the storage units. His ancient eyes looked at them both. How long have you been standing there? Jake asked. Long enough, Krell said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. I wondered when you would bring someone here, Lieutenant Morrison. Or should I say, Jake Morrison, survivor of Earth's final defense. You know? Amy said, shocked. Of course I know, Krell said. I am 3,000 years old. I have access to all the Council's secrets. I voted on the decision to seal humanity's records. You voted to lie to us, Jake said. There was anger in his voice. I voted to give you time to heal, Krell corrected. And I was right. Look at humanity now, thriving, happy, at peace. Would that have been possible if you had grown up with the trauma of the war fresh in your minds? Amy found her voice. But the Devourers are coming back. Don't we deserve to know what we're facing? The news started coming in 2 days before the Council meeting. A mining colony on the edge of the galaxy had gone dark. Communications were down. Ships sent to investigate found nothing but wreckage. At first, people thought it was pirates or a system failure. Then another colony went silent. Then another. Within 24 hours, 5 colonies had disappeared. The Academy's command center became a hub of frantic activity. Officers gathered around display screens, watching sensor data from across the galaxy. Amy stood in the back of the room watching Jake study the reports with increasing concern. "It's the same pattern," Jake said quietly to her. "The same way it started last time. They test our defenses first. Hit the edges. See how we respond." Commander Vex was at the main console coordinating with Fleet Command. Her forearms moved rapidly across the controls. "We're sending battle groups to investigate," she announced. "Standard defensive formations. We should have eyes on the affected areas within 6 hours." Jake stepped forward. "Commander, those formations won't work." Vex's compound eyes turned to look at him. "Excuse me, Lieutenant? Your standard formations assume an enemy that fights like we do," Jake said. "Ships against ships. The Devourers don't fight that way. They swarm. They adapt. If you send your fleet in those formations, they'll be torn apart." "And how would you know that, Lieutenant?" Vex's voice was cold. "You're a tactical instructor, not a field commander. And you certainly have no experience with the Devourers." Jake's jaw tightened. Amy could see him struggling with whether to reveal the truth. Before he could respond, High Instructor Krell entered the command center. "He knows because he has fought them before," Krell said. His voice silenced the entire room. "As have I. And if you want your people to survive what is coming, Commander Vex, you will listen to him." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Vex stared at Krell in disbelief. "What are you talking about? The last Prime War was 800 years ago. No one here could have fought in it." "I was there," Krell said simply. "I watched 17 species fall, and I watched one species survive. The humans." The murmurs grew louder. Several officers started talking at once. Vex held up one hand for silence. "That's impossible. Humans weren't even in space during the last Prime War." "That is what you were told," Krell said. "The truth is different, and the truth is about to become very important. A scout ship returned 1 hour ago. It has footage. Everyone needs to see this." Krell walked to the main display and activated it. The screen filled with an image from space. At first, Amy couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. Then her mind processed it and her blood went cold. They were massive. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, moving through space like a school of fish. But these were no fish. They were nightmare creatures, part machine and part something organic. Their bodies twisted in ways that shouldn't be possible. They pulsed with a sickly light. "Devourers," someone whispered. The video showed them descending on a colony world. The settlement tried to fight back. Defensive platforms fired energy weapons. The beams hit the Devourers and seemed to just disappear into them. The creatures didn't even slow down. What happened next was too horrible to watch, but no one could look away. The Devourers landed and began consuming. Buildings, vehicles, people, everything. They moved like a wave of destruction, leaving nothing behind but bare rock. In less than an hour, a colony of 4 million people simply ceased to exist. The video ended. The command center was silent. Amy saw fear on faces that had never known fear before. These were trained military officers, veterans of countless battles. But they had never seen anything like this. "They're not supposed to return for another 150 years, Vex said. Her voice shook slightly. "Why are they here now?" "Does it matter?" Jake said. "They're here, and they're not going to wait for us to be ready." "The Galactic Council is convening an emergency session in 2 hours," Krell announced. "All species representatives will attend. They need to decide how to respond." "What's there to decide?" an officer asked. "We fight them." "With what tactics?" Jake asked. "You saw that video. Energy weapons don't work. Standard defensive formations don't work. Everything in our military doctrine assumes an enemy that plays by the same rules we do. The Devourers don't have rules. Then what do we do?" Vex asked. The arrogance was gone from her voice now. She sounded genuinely afraid. Jake looked at Krell, who nodded. "We learn from those who survived before," Jake said. "We learn from humanity." 2 hours later, the Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in concentric rings around the central platform. Amy had never been to a council session before. The sheer number of different beings in one place was overwhelming. She sat in the human delegation section with Jake. Around them, Human diplomats and military officers looked nervous. They had been briefed on what was about to happen, and none of them were happy about it. The council speaker, a towering being made of crystalline structures, called the session to order. "We face an unprecedented crisis," the speaker announced. "The Devourers have returned ahead of schedule. Early reports indicate the swarm is 3 times larger than previous invasions. We must decide on a course of action." Multiple representatives started speaking at once, arguing for different strategies. Some wanted to evacuate the edge colonies and fortify the core worlds. Others wanted to send the entire fleet to meet the Devourers in deep space. Still others suggested trying to negotiate or find a way to communicate. Jake leaned over to Amy. "They have no idea what they're dealing with," he whispered. "You can't negotiate with the Devourers. You can't reason with them. You can only survive them." Finally, High Instructor Krell stood. His massive form commanded attention. "Honored representatives, you are debating tactics based on theory. I am here to tell you that one species in this chamber has practical experience fighting the Devourers. And it is time that experience was shared." "What species?" the speaker asked. "The humans," Krell said. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted questions and objections. The human delegation looked stunned. Even they didn't know what Krell was talking about. Commander Vex stood. "That's absurd. Humans are one of the youngest spacefaring species. They weren't present during the last Prime War." "They were present," Krell said, "and they survived. I propose unsealing the classified records from Earth to prove it." The speaker looked troubled. "Those records were sealed by council decree. We cannot simply unseal them without majority vote." "Then I call for a vote," Krell said. The debate that followed was fierce. Many species objected to revealing the truth about humanity. Some feared humans would become arrogant and dangerous if they learned their true history. Others worried about the political implications of admitting the council had been lying for 600 years. But the fear of the Devourers was stronger than any political concern. One by one, representatives voted to unseal the records. When the vote was complete, the speaker announced, "The motion passes. The records will be unsealed and shared with select military leadership." "No," Jake said, standing up. Everyone turned to look at him. "Not just military leadership, everyone. All humans deserve to know their own history." "That is not wise," the speaker said. "The information could cause panic and social disruption, or it could give them the strength to face what's coming," Jake countered. "You've spent 800 years protecting humans from their own past. Maybe it's time to trust them with the truth." Amy stood as well. "I'm a cadet. I'm nobody important, but I've seen the records. I know what our ancestors did, and I can tell you that humans today are stronger than you think. We deserve to know. We need to know." More humans stood. Soon the entire human delegation was on their feet, demanding the truth be revealed. The speaker conferred with other council members. Finally, a decision was reached. "Very well. The records will be made public, but only to the human population. The rest of the galaxy will be told only what they need to know." It wasn't everything Jake had wanted, but it was a start. That night, every human in the galaxy received the same message. It contained video files, historical documents, and a simple introduction from the Galactic Council, admitting they had hidden the truth. Amy watched from her quarters as the news spread across human space. Social networks exploded with reactions. Some people were angry at the deception. Others were proud of what their ancestors had done. Many were simply shocked. But underneath all the emotions, Amy saw something else emerging. Determination. The same determination that had let their ancestors survive 3 years of hell. Jake came to her quarters around midnight. "Have you been watching the responses?" he asked. "Yes," Amy said. "People are handling it better than the council expected." "That's because we're survivors," Jake said. "It's in our blood. Even the ones who don't consciously remember the war, they carry it in their genes. The instinct to fight, the will to live. You can't erase that." Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Jake's communication device beeped urgently. He answered it and his face went pale. "What is it?" Amy asked. "The Devourers," Jake said. "They've hit New Thessia. It's one of the largest colony worlds in the Outer Rim. 4 billion people." They rushed to the command center. The main display showed live. The transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere 3 days after the attack on New Thessia. Amy pressed her face against the window, watching her homeworld grow larger below them. She had left Earth 5 years ago to join the military. She had never expected to return under these circumstances. Beside her, Jake sat in silence. He had barely spoken during the entire journey. Amy couldn't imagine what it must be like for him, returning to a world that had changed so much since he last saw it. What was it like? She asked quietly. Earth during the war? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Beautiful, he finally said. Even covered in ash and fire, it was beautiful. Because it was home, and we were willing to die for it. The ship landed at a military base in Antarctica. Amy had never been to this part of Earth before. The base looked ordinary from the outside, just a cluster of buildings on the ice. But as they were led deeper inside, descending elevator after elevator, she realized this was no ordinary facility. This is the vault, Jake explained as they walked through metal corridors far beneath the ice. One of several hidden installations around Earth. This is where we've been keeping the truth safe. They entered a massive chamber. Amy stopped in her tracks, staring in amazement. The room was enormous, carved out of solid rock, and it was filled with people. Hundreds of men and women, all wearing military uniforms from dozens of different eras. Some looked young, others looked middle-aged. But Amy knew the truth. These were the sleepers. People who had been children during the war, frozen in time, woken gradually over the centuries. A woman approached them. She was tall and gray-haired, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore the uniform of a general, with more medals than Amy had ever seen on one person. Jake Morrison, the woman said with a slight smile. It's been a while. General Rivers, Jake replied. Good to see you. Rivers turned to Amy. And you must be Cadet Porter. Jake has told me about you. You're the one who insisted on knowing the truth. Yes, ma'am, Amy said. Good, Rivers said. We need more people willing to face uncomfortable truths. Come. There's much to show you. She led them through the vault. Amy saw rooms filled with old computers, storing data from the war. Armories containing weapons that looked ancient but well-maintained. Training facilities where sleepers were teaching younger soldiers fighting techniques that had been developed 800 years ago. We've been preparing for this day, Rivers explained. We knew the Devourers would return eventually. We just hoped we'd have more time. They entered a command center. Large screens showed tactical displays from across human space. Amy could see fleet movements, resource allocations, and casualty reports from the ongoing attacks. Since the truth was revealed 3 days ago, everything has changed, Rivers said. Recruitment stations across human space are overwhelmed. Millions of people are volunteering. Factories are retooling to produce military equipment. It's like the entire species just woke up. They did wake up, Jake said. They learned who they really are. What they're capable of, Rivers nodded. But knowledge isn't enough. We need to mobilize properly, which is why I've called you here. Both of you. She activated another display. This one showed a map of the solar system, with markers indicating various locations. During the original war, we built ships, crude by modern standards but effective against Devourers. We hid them after the war. Dozens of vessels scattered throughout the asteroid belt and beyond. They've been maintained by sleepers over the centuries. They're ready to fly. Amy stared at the display. Why keep them? Why not just build new ships with modern technology? Because modern ships weren't designed to fight Devourers, Rivers said. They have energy shields that the Devourers can drain. Advanced computers that can be corrupted. These old ships are simple, thick armor. Kinetic weapons. Nuclear warheads. The Devourers adapted to energy weapons 800 years ago. But they never fully adapted to simple, brutal firepower. Jake studied the display. You want to bring them out of storage. More than that, Rivers said. I want to tell modern humanity the complete truth. Not just about the war, but about these ships. About the tactics we developed. About everything we learned. The Council won't like that, Amy said. The Council is afraid, Rivers replied. They've always been afraid of what we might become if we remembered. But I'm more afraid of what will happen if we don't remember. The Devourers are here, and we're the only species that knows how to fight them. Jake looked troubled. Kate, I watched what the war did to our people. The brutality we embraced. The things we became capable of. Do we really want to bring that back? Rivers met his gaze. We don't have a choice, Jake. It's not about what we want. It's about survival. And yes, war brings out the worst in people. but it also brings out the best. Courage, sacrifice, the willingness to stand and fight when everything seems hopeless. Before Jake could respond, an alarm sounded. One of the technicians called out, "General, we're getting reports of a major information breach. Someone's leaked the location of the vault to Galactic Media." Rivers cursed. "Who?" "Tracking it back now. It came from the Zentari Military Command. Commander Vex's office specifically." Amy felt a chill. "She's trying to expose us." "More than that," Rivers said, reading the incoming messages. "She's leaked everything. The location of our hidden ships, the tactical data, all of it. And it's not just going to human networks. It's going everywhere. Every species in the galaxy is about to learn exactly what humanity has been hiding." Jake slammed his fist on the console. "She's trying to turn the galaxy against us. Make them see us as a threat." "Then she's failed," Rivers said calmly. She was watching the data streams with interest. "Look at the responses. Yes, some species are afraid, but more of them are asking questions. They want to know how we survived. They want to learn from us." She was right. Amy watched as messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Military commanders requesting tactical briefings, scientists wanting to study human weapons, diplomats asking for formal knowledge-sharing agreements. But more interesting were the messages coming from human space itself. Regular people, not military personnel, responding to the leaked information. And the response was not what Amy had expected. There was no panic, no fear. Instead, there was pride and determination. Message after message from humans who had just learned their complete history, saying the same thing. "We did it before. We'll do it again." "Commander Vex wanted to scare people," Amy said, "but she gave them hope instead." Rivers smiled. "Never underestimate humanity's ability to find strength in adversity. It's what we do best." Over the next few hours, the situation developed rapidly. Earth's government held an emergency session and voted to fully mobilize. The hidden ships were brought out of storage and prepared for combat. Training facilities across human space began teaching the old tactics to new recruits. Amy watched it all happen with a sense of awe. Humanity was transforming before her eyes. The peaceful, curious species that had joined the galactic community 200 years ago was revealing another face. The face of survivors, fighters, a species that had stared extinction in the face and refused to blink. "What happens now?" she asked Rivers. "Now we show the galaxy what we're capable of," Rivers said. "Not to frighten them, but to give them hope. To show them that the Devourers can be fought, can be survived." She turned to Jake. "I want you back in the field. We need experienced commanders who know how to fight Devourers. You've been hiding long enough?" Jake nodded slowly. "What about her?" He gestured to Amy. "Her?" Rivers looked at Amy with an appraising eye. "She's the bridge between the old and the new. She knows our history, but she's part of modern humanity. We need people like her to help others understand." Amy straightened. "What do you need me to do?" "Help train the new recruits," Rivers said. "You've seen the old records. You know what worked and what didn't. Share that knowledge. Make sure the next generation is ready." Over the following weeks, Earth became a hive of activity. Shipyards worked around the clock. Training centers were filled to capacity. The old warships were brought to operational status and crewed by a mix of sleepers who knew how to operate them, and modern humans eager to learn. Amy threw herself into the work. She taught classes on devourer behavior. Based on what she had learned from the archives, she helped develop new training programs that combined old tactics with modern technology. She watched as regular civilians transformed into soldiers, driven by the knowledge of what their ancestors had accomplished. Something else was happening too, something Amy noticed in the faces around her. The humans who learned their true history didn't become more warlike or aggressive. Instead, they became more confident, more certain of themselves. They knew what they were capable of, and that knowledge gave them strength. One evening, Amy found Jake standing outside the vault looking up at the stars. The Antarctic sky was clear and the stars were brilliant. "Thinking about the past?" she asked. "Thinking about the future," Jake said. "When I was put in cryosleep as a child, I thought humanity was finished. I thought we had survived but lost everything that made us who we were. But I was wrong." "How so?" Amy asked. "We didn't lose ourselves," Jake said. "We just needed time to heal. And now that we remember who we are, we're stronger than ever." Not. The Forge system was home to 6 billion people spread across 3 habitable planets, and dozens of orbital stations. It was also one of the galaxy's most important industrial centers, producing ships and weapons for the entire region. That's why the Devourers had chosen it as their next target. The combined fleet gathered in the outer reaches of the system. Amy stood on the bridge of the cruiser Horizon, watching the tactical display as more ships arrived. She had never seen so many vessels in one place. 10,000 warships from 100 different species, representing the full might of the Galactic Council. The fleet looked impressive. Sleek modern warships equipped with energy shields, plasma cannons, and quantum torpedoes, the pride of galactic military technology. Then there was the human contingent. 200 ships that looked nothing like the others. 50 were modern cruisers, similar to the Horizon. But the other 150 were the old warships from the Vault. They were blocky and ugly compared to the elegant alien vessels. No energy shields. No advanced weapons. Just thick armor plates and kinetic cannons. Jake commanded the old human fleet from the bridge of the Defiance, one of the original warships from 800 years ago. Amy could see his ship on the tactical display, positioned slightly apart from the main fleet. Commander Vex was in overall command of the fleet. Her voice came over the communication channel. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. The Devourers are approaching the Forge system. Estimated arrival in 30 minutes. All vessels will maintain formation and engage according to standard combat doctrine." Amy watched as the fleet arranged itself in the formation Vex had designed. It was textbook perfect, based on centuries of military theory. Ships arranged in layers with the heaviest vessels in front and support craft in the rear. Jake's voice came over the private channel he shared with Amy. "That formation won't work. The Devourers will tear through it like paper." "Should we warn them?" Amy asked. "I tried," Jake said. "Vex isn't listening. She thinks her advanced tactics will make the difference. She's about to learn why 17 species fell." The Devourers arrived exactly on schedule. They came out of dark space in a massive swarm, thousands of them. The creatures were even more horrifying than the videos had shown. Massive biomechanical entities that moved with unnatural grace. The smallest were the size of fighters. The largest were as big as moons. Commander Vex gave the order to fire. The galactic fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy weapons lit up space. Missiles streaked toward their targets. For a moment, it looked like it was working. Devourers exploded or tumbled away damaged. Then the swarm adapted. The Devourers began absorbing the energy weapons. Their bodies rippled and changed, becoming resistant to the plasma fire. They learned to avoid the missiles, moving in patterns that made them impossible to target effectively. And then they attacked. The swarm hit the fleet like a wave. Smaller Devourers swarmed individual ships, tearing through shields and armor. Larger ones smashed through entire formations. Within minutes, the carefully planned formation was breaking apart. Amy watched in horror as ship after ship went dark on the tactical display. The Devourers were learning faster than anyone had expected. Every tactic the fleet used, they adapted to within seconds. "All ships, break formation and engage at will," Vex ordered. There was panic in her voice now, but breaking formation only made things worse. Ships scattered and the Devourers picked them off one by one. The battle was turning into a massacre. "All ships, retreat," Vex commanded. "Fall back to the inner system. We need to regroup." The fleet began to pull back, but the Devourers followed, hungry for more kills. Then Jake's voice cut through the chaos. "Human fleet, this is Morrison. Ignore the retreat order. All ships, form up on me. We're going in. Lieutenant Morrison, stand down," Vex shouted. "That's a direct order." "Respectfully, Commander, your orders are getting people killed," Jake replied. "Human fleet, attack formation Delta. Close-range engagement. Remember your training." The 200 human ships broke away from the retreating fleet. They charged directly at the Devourer swarm. It looked like suicide. Amy held her breath as she watched. The human ships weren't trying to maintain distance like the other vessels had. They were getting close. Dangerously close. The old warships opened fire with their kinetic weapons. Solid metal slugs propelled by chemical explosives slammed into the Devourers. The creatures tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. The rounds simply punched through their bodies with brutal efficiency. When the Devourers got too close, the human ships didn't retreat. They launched nuclear warheads at point-blank range, often catching themselves in the blast radius. Their thick armor protected them from the worst of it. The Devourers had no such protection. More importantly, the humans fought differently. They didn't try to destroy the Devourers from a distance. They targeted weak points, joints, sensory organs, the places where the creatures were vulnerable. Amy watched in amazement as Jake's tactics worked. The Devourers were having trouble adapting to the human strategy. They had evolved to counter advanced technology. They didn't know how to fight simple, brutal, close-range combat. "All ships, watch what the humans are doing," a voice called out. Amy recognized it as Captain Cole from the Zentari fleet. "They're making it work. Follow their lead." The retreating fleet began to rally. Ships turned around and charged back into the fight, this time copying the human tactics, getting close, targeting weak points, using weapons the Devourers couldn't easily adapt to. The tide of battle slowly began to turn. On the horizon, Amy's ship took heavy damage. A Devourer broke through their defenses and boarded the vessel. Alarms blared as the creature tore through the hull. "All hands repel boarders," the captain ordered. Amy grabbed a rifle and joined the security teams rushing to intercept the Devourer. They found it in one of the cargo bays, a nightmare of metal and flesh tearing through everything in its path. The security team opened fire. Energy weapons had little effect. The creature adapted almost instantly, its body absorbing or deflecting the beams. "Switch to kinetic rounds," Amy shouted, remembering what she had learned from the old records. The team changed weapons. Solid slugs tore into the Devourer. It screamed, a sound that made Amy's bones ache, but it kept coming. Amy found herself moving without thinking. Her body seemed to know what to do. Instincts rising from somewhere deep inside, she aimed for the joints, just like the old soldiers had done 800 years ago. The creature moved in patterns that felt familiar, even though she had never seen a Devourer before this moment. It was genetic memory. The trauma and learning from the original war burned into humanity's DNA. Amy was fighting with knowledge her ancestors had paid for in blood. The Devourer fell. The security team stared at it, then at Amy. "How did you know?" one of them asked. Amy looked at her hands. They were steady. "I just knew," she said. "We all know. We just had to remember." The battle raged for 6 more hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed. The space around the forge system became a graveyard. But slowly, surely, the combined fleet was winning. The Devourers finally began to retreat. They pulled back, regrouping in the outer system. The fleet had held. Amy stood on the bridge of the damaged horizon looking at the casualty reports. 7,000 ships destroyed out of 10,000. Millions of crew members dead. The human fleet had lost 80% of its ships, but the forge system was saved. 6 billion people were alive because the fleet had held the line. Commander Vex's voice came over the communication channel. She sounded tired and humbled. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. Stand down from combat status. Begin rescue operations for survivors." She paused, then added, "Lieutenant Morrison, report to Fleet Command. I need to speak with you." An hour later, Amy received a message from Jake. "I'm being promoted." Vex admitted her tactics failed. "High Instructor Krell is taking over fleet coordination, and he wants me as his tactical advisor. What we did here today, everyone saw it. They know now that humanity's experience is real." Amy replied, "What happens now?" "Now we train them," Jake sent back. "Every species in the fleet needs to learn how to fight like we do, because that was just a scouting force. The main swarm is still coming." Amy looked at the damaged ships limping toward repair stations. She thought about the people who had died today, about the lessons purchased with their lives. The galaxy had learned something important today. The Devourers could be fought, could be hurt, could be driven back. It was a hard lesson, paid for in blood and wreckage, but it was a lesson humanity already knew. And now they would teach it to everyone else. In the ruins of the Defiance's bridge, Jake looked at the casualty reports and thought about the original war. 800 years ago, humanity had fought alone. They had survived, but barely. This time was different. This time they had allies. This time they could share what they had learned. "We held the line," he said to himself. "Just like before. But this time we taught others how to hold it with us." His communication officer looked up. "Sir, we're receiving messages from across the fleet. Everyone wants to know about human combat tactics." "They want to learn," Jake nodded. "Then we'll teach them. All of them. Because the real fight is still ahead of us." Outside the bridge windows, the stars shone cold and distant. 6 months passed. 6 months of constant fighting across the galaxy. The Devourers attacked system after system, and the combined fleet met them at every turn. Hundreds of billions died. Entire systems were evacuated. The galaxy was at war, but the fleet was learning. Every battle taught new lessons. Human tactics spread throughout the galactic forces. Ships began carrying kinetic weapons alongside their energy cannons. Crews trained in close-range combat. Commanders studied the old Earth records and adapted them to modern warfare. Jake had been promoted 3 times. He now held the rank of Admiral and served as High Instructor Krell's chief tactical advisor. Together, they coordinated the defense of dozens of systems at once. Amy had been promoted too. She commanded a mixed-species task force, teaching alien crews how to fight like humans. Her genetic memory had fully awakened during these months of constant combat. She fought with instincts 800 years old. Commander Vex had changed the most. The arrogant Zentari who had mocked humanity 6 months ago was gone. In her place was a humble officer who listened and learned. She had become one of Jake's most trusted subordinates. But despite all their efforts, the war was not going well. The Devourers kept coming. For every swarm destroyed, 2 more appeared. The galaxy was slowly losing ground. Then General Rivers made a discovery. She called Jake and Amy to a secure meeting in Earth's command center. When they arrived, they found Krell there as well, along with the galaxy's top scientists. "We've been studying the Devourers for months," Rivers began, "analyzing their movement patterns, their attack strategies, everything. And we found something the original Earth scientists discovered but never had time to use." She activated a holographic display. It showed the galaxy with glowing lines tracing Devourer movements. "They're not attacking randomly. They're following a path. All the swarms, every single attack, they're all moving in the same direction." "Toward what?" Amy asked. "The galactic core," one of the scientists answered. "There's something there they're trying to reach." Rivers pulled up more data. The ancient Earth scientists figured it out in the final months of their war. The Devourers aren't a natural species. They're a weapon. A doomsday device created by a civilization that died millions of years ago. "A weapon?" Jake said. "Against what?" "We don't know," Rivers admitted. "Whatever threat they were created to fight is long gone. But the Devourers remained, programmed to consume everything in their path. Except they weren't supposed to run forever. There's a control nexus in the galactic core. If they reach it, they'll shut down." The room was silent as everyone processed this information. "So they're not trying to destroy us," Amy said slowly. "They're trying to reach the nexus. We're just in the way." "Exactly," Rivers said. "Which gives us an option we never had before. Instead of fighting them everywhere, we create a corridor, evacuate a path of systems leading to the galactic core. Let them through." "You want us to give them a clear path?" Vex asked. She had been quiet until now. "That means abandoning 100 systems. Trillions of people would have to be evacuated." "The alternative is fighting this war for decades," Krell said. His ancient voice was heavy. "Losing billions more. Perhaps losing everything. This way we sacrifice territory to save lives." Jake studied the holographic display. It could work. "But we'd need a rearguard, ships to keep the Devourers moving in the right direction, to make sure they follow the path and don't branch off to attack other systems." "A suicide mission," Amy said quietly. "Yes," Rivers admitted. "The rearguard would have to stay just ahead of the swarm, close enough to keep their attention, but not so far that they disperse. Ships would be lost. Probably most of them." "I'll lead it," Amy said immediately. Jake looked at her sharply. "Amy, no. You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," Amy said. 800 years ago, our ancestors held the line so others could survive. It's my turn now." "It's our turn," Vex stood. "The Zentari fleet will join the rearguard. We have learned from humanity. Now it's time to prove we learned well." More commanders stood, species from across the galaxy, all volunteering for the mission. Krell watched them with something like pride in his ancient stone face. "Then it's decided," Rivers said. "We begin the evacuation immediately. The rearguard will assemble at the edge of the corridor in 1 week." The largest evacuation in galactic history began. Humans led the effort, drawing on experience from their own war when they had evacuated Earth system by system. Billions of people were moved to safety. Entire planets were emptied. Industry was relocated. The galaxy reshaped itself to create a path for the Devourers. Amy spent those 7 days preparing. She trained her crews. She planned routes. She said goodbye to people she might never see again. On the final night before the mission began, Jake came to see her. They stood together on an observation deck looking at the stars. "You don't have to do this," Jake said again. "Neither did our ancestors," Amy replied. "But they did it anyway. That's what it means to be human. We hold the line. We give others a chance to survive," Jake nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you. Your ancestors would be proud too." The rear guard assembled the next day, 500 ships from dozens of species. It was a fraction of the original fleet, but it would have to be enough. They took position at the beginning of the corridor and waited. The Devourers came exactly as predicted. Thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands, a swarm larger than anything the galaxy had seen. Amy gave the order. "All ships engage. Draw their attention. Make them follow us." The rear guard opened fire and then began a fighting retreat down the corridor. They stayed just ahead of the swarm, close enough to keep the Devourers interested but far enough to avoid being completely overwhelmed. It was brutal work. Ships fell every day. Crews exhausted themselves fighting constant battles. But they held the line. They kept the Devourers moving in the right direction. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The rearguard fought and retreated system after system. They left trails of wreckage behind them, marking their path with sacrifice. Other species learned what humanity had always known. That survival isn't about winning every battle. It's about holding on long enough to give others a chance, without buying time with blood. Commander Vex, against orders, brought a Zentari task force to reinforce the rearguard halfway through the journey. She joined Amy on the bridge of the command ship. "I was wrong about humans," Vex said. "I thought you were weak. I didn't understand that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. About fighting even when everything seems hopeless." Amy smiled tiredly. "We're not special. We just learned these lessons earlier than everyone else. Now we're all learning them together." Finally, after 3 months of constant fighting, they reached the galactic core. The rearguard, now reduced to just 50 ships, took position around an ancient structure floating in space. The Nexus, the control center for the Devourers. The swarm converged on it. Thousands of Devourers descended on the structure, and as they made contact, something changed. Their movements became less aggressive, more purposeful. They were shutting down, their ancient programming finally complete. "We did it," someone whispered on the communication channel. But then the sensors detected something wrong. A portion of the swarm wasn't responding to the Nexus. Damaged Devourers, their programming corrupted, unable to receive the shutdown command. They were turning back toward inhabited space. There were still hundreds of them, more than enough to devastate dozens of worlds. "Jake's reinforcements are 3 hours away," Vex reported. "We need to hold these Devourers here." Amy looked at the 50 ships remaining in the rearguard, battered, damaged, running on fumes and determination. "But still ready, all ships," she said. "One more time. We hold the line," they charged. 50 ships against hundreds of Devourers. The battle was savage. Ships fell one by one, giving their lives to buy minutes. Amy's ship took critical damage. Life support was failing. Weapons were gone. But she kept fighting, using the ship itself as a weapon, ramming damaged Devourers. When Jake's reinforcements finally arrived, only 3 ships remained. Amy's command vessel was drifting, powerless but intact. They had held just long enough. The fresh fleet swept through the damaged Devourers, destroying them. The threat was finally ended. Jake's ship docked with Amy's damaged vessel. He found her on the bridge, bruised and exhausted but alive. "You held," he said simply. "We held," Amy corrected. "All of us, human and alien. We held the line together." 2 years later, the galaxy was healing. The evacuated systems were being resettled. New memorials honored those who had fallen in the war. The Devourer threat was ended. The Galactic Academy had a new memorial garden. It was larger than the old one. Names from hundreds of species covered the walls, human and alien, all who had learned to stand together. Amy taught at the academy now. She had been promoted to instructor, teaching tactics to new cadets. When students asked her what the war had been like, she always told them the truth. It was hell. People died. Good people. But we survived, and we made sure others survived too. That's what matters. Jake visited the old memorial sometimes, the black wall with names from 800 years ago. But he also visited the new memorial, the one that held names of all species. Admiral Vex joined him one evening. She was different now.